Welcome to the Sisters in Service podcast. My name is Kat Gorchado. I'm a fellow Air Force veteran who, after 20 years of active duty, struggled with transition after leaving service. The Sisters in Service podcast is a platform to include all women veterans, organizations, military spouses, and Blue Star, Gold Star families in talking about the trials and triumphs we face while in service and after service. I want to take a moment to thank all of you who have taken the time to listen and follow me on my journey. My podcast is every Tuesday, and I hope you will tune in. Until then, please be safe, take care of each other, and until next time. Hello, Sisters in Service. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. And I am your host. Of course, you know me, Kat Gorchado. Today, we are speaking to Roweena Davis. She is an Army veteran. She's also a huge advocate for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. She is one of the founders of the We Believe You Supporting Our Survivors organization, and she's also a published author, which we'll speak on all of those later. However, welcome, Roweena.
So I am so glad to be here. It's always awesome to share my story and to advocate and to continue to speak out. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that's one of the reasons that, you know, when I mean, you've been blowing up on Facebook and Clubhouse and everything. I was like, okay, who is this woman? Okay. And then I started reading out and I was like, okay, let's see if she's willing to come on the podcast, which is why I asked you, because of your advocacy, for, sexual assault and domestic violence. So I was looking on your Facebook page. Yes, I was creeping.
I don't mind at all. I'm sure you're not the only one. So okay.
And I saw a post on there about Guard and Reservists. So why do you think people don't really acknowledge you as a veteran, as really being in the service?
So I think that for a long time, reservists and National Guardsmen were not taken too seriously. They weren't really seen as true members who actually served in the military, because they were only doing that 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out the year. While as active duty, of course, would be doing it from 9 to 5 every day. So we really, for a while, didn't gain a lot of respect from active duty service members because we were only doing that 2 weeks a month and 1 weekend out the year. It wasn't really until, to me, and on the outside looking in, it wasn't really until we started having these deployments and mobilizations that people really started to see active duty and everyone started to see that, hey, we might be doing the 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out the year, but we still serve. We still have, I know soldiers and friends who have deployed at least 5 or 6 times that are a part of the Army Reserve and the Army National Guard. The Army National Guard is often the first to get called to duty when they do have to serve. So I think before we weren't really taken too seriously. I think now, seeing that we have multiple deployments, we're taking a little bit more seriously, but also it's difficult being an Army reservist. It's difficult in so many aspects. For me, I know one of the things that's challenging is that you have to balance 2 jobs. So not only do you have to serve your job from 9 to 5 during the week, but you also have to put on another skill set and serve your military training 1 weekend out the month and that 2 weeks out the year. It could be longer. So you're actually working dual hats, which can be a challenge. Another challenge for me with the Army Reserve that I don't think a lot of people think of is that we don't have access to a lot of the resources that active duty members have. So if I was to get sick, if I needed psychological assistance or a therapist, I wouldn't just be able to walk into a military hospital and use TRICARE and say, hey, I want to be seen today. Let me get this appointment in. I have to find my own VA provider or my own provider and pay out of pocket for it. And even with other resources such as therapy, I have to provide my own resources. And even though I'm retired as of September,
congratulations.
Thank you. Unlike my active duty counterparts who normally get their retirement pay immediately, I have to wait till I turn 60. And because I've been on so many deployments, 57, but us as reservists have to wait until we're like 57, 58, 59, 60 to even start drawing those retirement benefits. And we don't get to do those any earlier unless we've been on multiple deployments or unless we have a lot of active duty time. So I think that for me, we are starting to gain more respect with active duty, from active duty and be taken seriously. But I just think that was the reason that I posted, was because a lot of community members and a lot of people didn't see reserves and National Guard as a serious military force, but we are. So
were you getting that from veterans, from civilians, or was it a combination of both?
It was a combination of both. Really I hear it more from military members than from really civilians, because civilians really don't understand. They see you in uniform and just think, hey, she's active duty, she's going to the work.
Interesting.
But I really used to hear it from active duty members, not so much anymore, but I really used to hear it from active duty members. We would be called, like a fake force, or we're not really taken too seriously in the Army Reserve. But in the Army Reserve, when you're serving, you have to serve in, like I said, multiple jobs. But even when you go to that 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out the year, you're performing so many different roles and responsibilities where sometimes with active duty, they're only doing that one specific role. So I think now over the past probably at least 10 years, we've been taken more seriously. And I don't remember what triggered that post per se. I think that sometimes when I see posts about people being out of uniform and people's uniform looking jacked up, they always say, oh, that must be a reservist or a National Guard.
Oh, really? I've never heard that before.
Yes, I have heard it all the time, that that must be the reservist, or that must be the National Guard, because, active duty is too squared away to look like that. But in all actuality, most of the times it's not the reservist and National Guard. It's actually active duty.
Active duty. Yeah. So, my husband used to make fun of me all the time.
Really?
He would be slick. His sleeves would be slick and shiny and crisp. And I would just shake my uniform and I'm like, okay, that's good. And he used to say that he said, you're the most unmilitary military person I know.
Yep. And that's, I'm saying that people used to think that that's just reservists and National Guard. We just shake our uniform, don't shine our boots, and we just walk out the door and that's it. But, that's changed. That perception, the perception has changed now. And it's not as much as it was before. But yeah, I've heard stories about the difference between National Guard, reservists, and active duty. And I still hear it now, but I don't hear it much because I'm retired, but I still see it and still hear it because I work in a military setting still. So
you do.
That's what triggered that post with the uniform.
So you are, or were, a victim's advocate in the Army Reserve. Right. Is this what sparked your advocacy to be, or to help just people who are suffering from domestic violence and or sexual trauma?
So it was a little bit of that, but I think that for me, the main thing that helped with the victim advocate side, that was amazing. I got a chance to, help a lot of women and men. The victim advocate is really only focused on sexual assault and sexual harassment. So there's really not a big piece in the military that's focused on domestic violence outside of FAP, which is the Family Advocacy Program. But that's another conversation because we'll be here all day. But I really started the advocacy, number one, when I separated from my spouse in 2015, because I'm a survivor of domestic violence. So I really started to advocate and be more of a voice and start to speak out. And it wasn't until my divorce became final, kind of in 2019, that I got the confidence and the strength to actually start speaking out for survivors, because I always say that survivors are always in need of help and will always seek help. But I think that sometimes hearing the stories of someone that's been through a similar situation that you've been through is often more rewarding and more appreciative of that survivor rather than someone who hasn't been through the same thing. So I only share my story, number one, of course, because I want to help people. And I share my story, number two, because it's a healing journey for me as well to see all the stuff. and to realize, hey, I came through a lot of stuff and I'm sharing this because I came through so much and you can come through the same thing. So that's really why I started to advocate. And I'm not a survivor of sexual assault, but I have a lot of friends who are survivors of sexual assault, one in particular who actually helped me found the organization. And she is a huge advocate for sexual assault, especially military sexual trauma.
Yes.
And I think that while I'm an advocate, while I will always speak up and speak out for those that don't have a voice, I often use her as the voice for MST, for military sexual trauma, because she is amazing and she will share her story. So I think that for me, advocating is just sharing your voice and making sure that your story is told and your story is heard, because you never know who you're going to affect by sharing your story. So that's kind of why I started advocating. So.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I did was I did some homework and I was looking up the statistics on domestic violence in the military. And the one common denominator that I saw all the time was the combination of PTSD and domestic violence. There was always a PTSD component there. I'm going to go on my soapbox again. I hate the D in PTSD. I just do. Okay. Right. You guys have heard, my audience has heard me say this. I hate it. I don't like it, but I'm going to say PTS. Okay. Sure. But do you think that is there a protocol for combat veterans to be screened for PTSD after a deployment, especially if they have a family?
There is. And I can just, like I said, I'm not an expert. I will never claim to be an expert on anything. What I am speaking on is just things that I've seen firsthand and things that I've done firsthand and experienced firsthand. So whenever you come back from a deployment, they have what's called it's like a health assessment, like a deployment health assessment that will assess you in all types of areas, your mental health, your physical health, things such of that nature. The problem with that, and the reason why I see that that's not very effective, is because you have a soldier, a military member, I keep saying soldier because I'm in the Army, but you have a military member who's been away from their family for 9 months to a year, sometimes longer. So when they're at their demobilization site, which is the site that they go to prior to them going home, they're not thinking of trying to stay longer, because often if you answer certain questions, especially when it comes to mental health, if you answer certain questions like, are you seeking mental health? Was your mental health affected while you were deployed? And you check yes, you're often held longer at that site and you don't get to move forward to see your family faster. So I think a lot of military members don't answer those questions honestly, because they've been separated from their families for such a long time that the only thing that's on their mind once they get back to that mobilization site to take that survey is the quickest way to see their family. So they'll check no on everything, not realizing that health assessment is really, really crucial and really important to making sure that you get the help that you need, that you might have seen while you were deployed or while you were serving in your mobilization. But I think a lot of times soldiers and military members don't answer those questions honestly.
They just want to get home.
They just want to get home, number one. And then number two, even in other aspects of the military, they don't speak out to the point that they need mental health, because a lot of our jobs require security clearances. Mm-hmm. A lot of our jobs require certain things that if we share that we have this thing going on with us mentally, if we share that we're emotionally drained, that we're tired, and that we are depressed and have anxiety, that's going to trigger a red flag. And that is going to make you consider not deployable. You'll be seen as your peers. This is just a stigma. You'll be seen by your peers as weak. If you're a senior leader, you definitely don't want to do it because you don't want to let your soldiers down. So it's just kind of like a double-edged sword when it comes to combat veterans and PTS. See what I did there? I didn't do the D.
Thank you.
Because I have it too. I have PTS. So yeah. So it's just kind of like a double-edged sword. Like I feel that sometimes the military is so big on ways and strategies to seek mental health, and to make sure that we're good mentally. But I think a lot of times they miss the mark on actually having military members seek help, because a lot of people don't see anyone like them seeking help. And a lot of people don't see people putting themselves out there to say, hey, if you're going through this, if you're depressed, if you're sad, make sure you go reach out for help. But a lot of people don't see that, because we still have that stigma in the military that it's not okay to seek help. And that's still an issue for me, and it's still a problem. And you're not going to get through that having PowerPoint classes and tell someone to use a certain step model to effectively seek help. You have to be the face. You have to be a leader that's out there saying, this is what I did. I struggle with depression. I struggle with anxiety. I am a senior ranking officer, senior ranking leader in the military, and it's okay for you to seek help because I did. I didn't lose my clearance. I didn't lose my job. But I just think it's time to have those like open and upfront conversations that we're still not having, and then it results into tragedy later on.
Well, I think it's been a stigma for years. It was a stigma when I was in over 20 years ago.
It has.
Especially, and I had a top secret clearance. So if you had any kind of TS, SCI, SBI, the first thing you thought of was, okay, I'm going to lose my clearance or it's going to get downgraded. You didn't do anything. You just kind of said, I'll just deal with it on my own.
Absolutely.
Do you think that there's a correlation between the number of deployments that someone goes on and the increase in domestic violence?
Speaking just from, I guess, my own experiences and things that I've seen.
Sure.
I think that could be a trigger. I think that and this is for women and men, because, men can be abused as well.
Yes, they can.
I think that when we come back from deployment, we are in such a mental state, and our mental state like totally changes. And sometimes I'll have to tell my friends who don't understand, sometimes the person that left is not the same person that comes back. So I definitely think that deployments and multiple deployments can be a trigger. But I also think that sometimes with domestic violence, I'm not going to say it's a choice, but I think that with domestic violence, the emotional and physical abuse that's done by the abuser, I've seen a lot of cases where it's not really related to deployments. Yeah, it could play a factor in it. Definitely from seeing the stress and realizing that you're definitely not the same person you were when you left.
Right.
But I think it could go both ways. And that's really
right. And you can only speak on personal experience.
I can only speak on personal experiences.
Or give your opinion about it.
Right. And then, I have friends who are also military spouses as well. And they have told me, when my husband came back, that he was a totally different person. And then it did increase. But there have been other military spouses or military women who have told me, I've been suffering with this for years and he hasn't been on one single deployment. So I think it's just a mixture of the two. I don't have like studies or statistics in front of me. This is just me speaking with other women and speaking with men too as well. But I definitely think it can be a combination of both. I definitely think that the PTSD can add and trigger a lot more, but sometimes we can't really use, I said the D word, I'm sorry. Sometimes we can't always use the PTS, I guess, for certain actions that we do. Right. So sometimes if you've given your wife or your husband sometimes a black eye, you can't say, oh, I'm sorry. This is just the PTS talking and I won't do it again.
Right.
Well, that person on the other side who's receiving it is not going to understand that. And they're not going to say, hey, he's just going through a lot. She's just going through a lot. She's a combat veteran. Let me be patient. There's only so much that person is going to be able
to do. Right.
Right. So there's only so much. And I think that sometimes, I'm not saying we use PTS as a reason. I think it triggers a lot. Don't ever get that mistaken, because it triggers a lot for me. But sometimes I have to realize that I can't always use the PTS as an excuse for the things that I do. And if I want to go about seeking help, I can do that. If I want to find different ways and strategies to cope with the things that I'm going through, then I can do that. But having the PTS is not just a sole reason why you should be an abuser and be an offender and come.
Well, I think too that, it's almost like a double-edged sword, because you have the military member who's deploying, you have the family member who's at home, who's now doing everything. They're like, as my mom calls it, the chief cook and bottle washer. They're doing everything. So then the deployed member comes back, the military or the spouse is doing everything, and not only doing everything, but doing it well. Member who's now back home feels like there's no place for them, and it causes all that, more anxiety, and then it can explode. Not that I know, that just kind of makes sense to me from what I've been reading.
Yeah. And then I think it makes sense that, a lot of times military spouses stay in these relationships because that is their, and we don't talk about military spouses a lot, but I'm glad that we're bringing it up. But a lot of them don't report because that is their, I'm not going to say bread and butter, but that is kind of what they rely on. Their kids go to school based on his or her income. They're financially set based on their income too. So if they leave, or if they report and that soldier or military member was to get in trouble, then that military member could lose their job and then affect the family livelihood. If she doesn't report, then it's still affecting the family's livelihood because the children are seeing, and the children are affected in a huge way, but the children are seeing what's going on. And it's just a double-edged sword too. And it's rough with the military spouses because you're also faced with some decisions that you have to make. And it's hard. And I have a friend who's a military spouse, and she does an amazing with her organization, but it's hard. It's hard being a military spouse and taking care of.
It's hard on both sides. I mean, people say, oh, it's hard being a military spouse, and it's hard. They're both hard. They're just hard in different ways. But I know that when I was looking at the statistics for domestic violence across the board in the armed services, they always caveat it by saying, but these numbers are probably higher only because of the number of cases that have not been reported, which is scary.
Absolutely. That's so factual. It's the same thing with sexual assault for me. The numbers that are reported are shocking as they are, but they're probably even more shocking if everyone who was sexually assaulted in the military would actually report. And I think it's really sad that it has come to a point where just military members are just scared to report. Because I always say it's hard for someone who hasn't been in the military to understand why we wouldn't go report and why we wouldn't say anything. And I always compare it to like a civilian reporting who's never served in the military. You can go file a police report, you can get the person arrested, and then nothing really affects you. Of course, with the physical and emotional well-being, but nothing
that
really
affects you a lot.
But when you're in the military, you have other decisions that you have to make. Yes. And you have to say, if I want to report this, how will this affect my family? How will this affect my career? Will I lose my job? Will I lose my promotion? Will I lose my security clearance? There's just so many other factors that are added related, in addition to still having to deal with, hey, I have bruises on my body, and hey, I have this mental state and this emotional state that, my partner puts me down and calls me names. So I still have to deal with that too. So you're dealing with physical, emotional, loss of job, clearance, family, livelihood.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And going through domestic violence and sexual assault is rough on its own, especially as a survivor. I know it's rough dealing with the emotional. It's rough dealing with the emotional scars that come with it. And I often say, it was physical for me too as well, but everything that he said emotionally, I remember everything and that was since 2015, actually 2009. I remember everything that was said to me, every word, every negative word.
That emotional abuse
is hard. And it's one of the reasons that I speak out. And one of the reasons I'm actually in therapy is not really so much the physical part. It's the emotional part that has stuck with me and stuck with my low self-esteem and my self-confidence and me not feeling good enough. So I think that I just say that's the reason why I share my story, because it's so important for others to hear that outside of physical, there's also emotional.
Of
And
course, yes.
you can still get through it. You can push through it. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. And for me, it's still a process. It's been like a forever process. It's still going on, but that's one of the reasons that I like to advocate and to share. So
tell our audience where you found your strength to get out, to get away, to say, this is enough.
So let me tell you, I had a question asked for me a few weeks ago. Did you see red flags in your relationship? And I will always say, yes, I did. However, those red flags are things that I saw, but things, number one, that I thought I could fix. And number two, they were so small that, hey, maybe we can get past it and maybe we can get over it and maybe we can do it together. So the small red flags eventually turned into the bigger red flags that led to me leaving. But I think the strength for me came from, and I left, and I'll tell people this all the time, I left at least 7 or 8 times with my girls, and I always came back because there's always a way that, and he was a narcissist, but there are always ways that they get you to come back. And I always came back. However, it wasn't until I realized, not even with myself, how this affected my oldest daughter and what she was seeing about a healthy relationship, and that this was not the example that I wanted to show her. At the time, my youngest one was like 1.5, so she really didn't see. She might have been affected in more ways than I think, but she really didn't see it like my oldest one. So it wasn't until I started thinking about that, like, I don't want my daughter to think that this is okay, to think that this is an example of a healthy relationship. So I decided, 2015, I just packed up my stuff. I didn't leave anything behind, took my youngest one and stayed with a friend for 1 or 2 months. And then I actually moved on post because I was a DA civilian. So I was able to move on post and get a house on post, and the rest is history. And to this day, that relationship affects me, but I can also tell that it affects my daughter as well. Sometimes in my previous relationship, she would hear us yelling or hear us arguing, and we were generally just arguing. There's love there, and he would never do anything to hurt her at all, but she still equates it to that negative relationship that I had with my ex, which makes it more complicated because that's actually my youngest daughter's father too.
Yeah.
So I have to have my oldest, express her feelings and how she feels, but I have to be careful of the way that she says things about him because that is my youngest daughter's father. So, I want to, I think people should understand as well that domestic violence, yes, affects the adults, but affects kids in so many ways that we don't even pay attention.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
It's really big. It's really, really big. Really,
I think
really big.
it's, domestic violence does so much to your self-esteem. I was in a volatile relationship. We weren't married, thank goodness.
Ooh.
But you're so caught up in just doing the right thing and saying the right thing and looking the right way. And you're in this little bubble.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course there were red flags, but you're like, no big deal. It's not that big of a deal, but, very controlling, very, always monitoring what I was doing. And thank goodness it was before cell phones, they couldn't track where I was going and stuff like that. Yeah. But the dangerous part though, was when I finally, I'm one of those where I'm like, okay, I've had enough. I'm getting ready to go. That was the most dangerous part.
It is.
Because that's when it started getting even more abusive. And to this day, when I think back, that I never once, not once, thought about reporting him. Not once. Yep. And I thought, what was wrong with me?
That's what I think.
It's, all the time. Oh, goodness.
I never thought, and he hit me probably, it wasn't as much physical as it was emotional, but there was a time that, I was on the ground with a black eye, and, of course I didn't go, it was done on a Friday, so I didn't have to be at work. I didn't go to the hospital because he took care of me. But that was just, I think back and I'm like, wow, all these times that I had to report, all these times that I could have done something, I didn't. But I kind of figure and find that things happen for a reason. And I'm not saying that the abuse is justified. That's totally not it. But I
it's
think
never justified. Yeah.
I had to go through that to.
Let me ask you this. If there is a family that's going through this, can they, as a family, request counseling without any retribution from a clearance being pulled or being demoted or anything like that?
So from my understanding, they can request counseling, but a lot of the counseling that military members request is done through TRICARE. So if they want to use another kind of insurance or go out of pocket, then yes, they can definitely request counseling. I'm a huge person of faith, like huge. So I'm always like, if you can speak to someone like a pastor or someone like that too, to get help as well. But I know that with TRICARE, it's often done through military channels because it's military insurance. But there are ways that are around it. And there are ways, if you use like private insurance or just using out of pocket, that you can do it as well. But there's also programs that are free programs. I often like talk to people about using like Military One Source. And that is one resource that I have actually referred people to use, families, individuals. And it's like free sessions that people can use, military members can use, to seek help. So I've used that before. I've used my 10 free sessions before. And it's often a resource that I will use for if people are in need of help as well.
What happens to, so I'm thinking about a family, you're going through domestic abuse or violence, and the stay-at-home parent decides that they're going to report the military member. So what happens to the family on both sides? What happens to the military member if they get convicted of that? I don't even know if that's the right word. But also what happens to the family? I mean, is it like two separate, because the family's like, now they're scared. They don't know what's going to happen. Is the military member, is a slap on the hand? Is it a Article 15? Or does it just depend on the command?
So it often really depends on the command. And I'll say this again, there is a program that's supposed to be geared towards domestic violence in the military. That's the Family Advocacy Program. However, that program is not very effective at all, which is why there is a bill that is being written up. It started in 2019. It's still going through the process and through the channels, but it changes the roles of the Family Advocacy Program and makes them more involved in getting help for survivors of domestic violence, as well as, so the families and survivors of domestic violence. So in regards to the military member, what I see, and this is just from my own personal experience, what I see happening to a lot of military members is that often, sometimes the cases will drag on, and by that time, the soldier can either choose to retire, the soldier transfers to another unit, the soldier gets promoted, and then nothing happens. So it's like it never even happened, which is a lot of times with sexual assault cases too as well. I know that the conviction process, especially if you're active duty, is a very, very long process. So what normally happens is they do get charged, and they have to go through court-martial, UCMJ, and then they stand trial. And then that's a whole nother process. So that process could take anywhere from like 6 months to like a year to even get completed. But I haven't really seen, and this is just me, I have other friends who have different opinions, but I haven't really seen all but one case in my career that I've seen with domestic violence that a soldier has actually been convicted and is now in prison for. So a lot of the cases just go unresolved, or they just happen so long or go on for so long that it's just often forgotten about, and the soldier or military member does other things. In regards to the family, unfortunately, and this is the reason why a lot of my counterparts are speaking out, unfortunately, there are not a lot of things that are out there for families who are survivors of domestic violence. There's shelters that are available, but those are like private shelters. So in talks with someone else, another organization called Operation Foxhole, who deals a lot with military families, she's an amazing person. We are trying to have the conversation and continue to talk about what happens to families, and it shouldn't be on taxpayer dollars to pay for something that happened with a Department of Defense soldier or military member.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
So we are trying to come up with ways and different things to, find lodging and find shelter for these families who are displaced. And we see all these military bases that have empty rooms, empty spaces and stuff like that. So why can't we utilize something like that? But that's just something, unfortunately, that I hate to say that it's not really in the works for families. There are different nonprofit organizations out there that do assist, that do provide like funding and assistance. But when you're talking about an entire family that has children, unfortunately, there's not a lot out there. And I hate to even say that out loud, but there really, really is not a lot out there.
No resources for them.
No, not a lot of resources. There's nonprofits that are out there that is geared towards your own state, but there's not a lot of resources that are out there that you can just say, hey, I'm a military family. Let me pick up and pack up and go to this resource or go to the shelter. And a lot of the shelters are geared just towards, like I said, civilian. No, I hate to use the word civilians.
I don't know what else to call them anymore.
But a lot of shelters are private shelters, which will take them in, but we're still paying for something that was done on the military dime. So that's kind of the thing that we're trying to work out, because what we don't want, and my counterparts, what we don't want is to have another case like Vanessa Guillem. And we don't want it to get to the point where we have to have someone die to start raising our voices and start speaking up about domestic violence. I don't have, I'm not the type of person, and I'll say this up front, I use my voice a lot just to share. I don't have a lot of statistics. I research, I talk to women, I talk to men who are survivors, because often that's more personal to me. So I think that just continuing to have the conversations right now about what we can do to help those survivors is going to be extremely important to hoping to get these resources up and running and to take care of our families.
So let's turn a corner. Let's talk about your organization. Tell us a little bit more about We Believe in Supporting Our Survivors organization. Did I say that right?
Sure. So We Believe You SOS, Supporting Our Survivors. So just a little background and history. Last year, of course, with Vanessa Guillem and the death on Fort Hood, I decided that I wanted to do something to let survivors know that we believe them, especially for those, and it's really geared towards military veterans and military spouses. So I really wanted to do something to let them know that even when their chain of command didn't believe them, when their friends, when their family members didn't believe them, that we still believe them, and you can come to us. You can come and know that you have a safe space here. So that really came about last year in July. It really was just supposed to be a 5K called We Believe You, Supporting Our Survivors. It really was just a 5K. It really was just a 5K. And that's really all I was going to do, was just a 5K, because, we raised awareness. With that, we had to choose, because we weren't a nonprofit. We had to choose an organization that we wanted to give back to. So we chose Protect Our Defenders, which is an amazing organization that helps with legislation and passing laws to help military members and their families get the justice that they need with domestic violence and sexual assault. So with that raise, we were able to give back $10,000 to Protect Our Defenders, which was amazing, which was awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that was really, really good. it really brought awareness to sexual assault in the military. So that was that. So then my team was like, Roweena, you have a passion for doing this. You like to share. Why not just turn into an organization and then eventually a nonprofit? So that's what we did. So lately we've just been kind of in the building stages of websites and all of that. But in the meantime, we've been having certain events that are free, that are geared towards not only focusing on the trauma of domestic violence and sexual assault, but how to heal and what steps need to be taken after you have left that toxic situation. So we have had like healing conferences for women. We've also had healing conferences for men. We're getting ready to do a challenge to let survivors know that we still believe them, kind of similar to like the suicide push-up challenge for 22.
Yes.
So we're working on doing something like that, hopefully in August and September. So we're just doing like little small events out there to let people know that we're still out there, that we still believe them, we still support them, until we can get to the point where we are 501c3 and then continue to advocate more and build more from there. So that's how We Believe You SOS was founded, just based off of a 5K and wanting to raise awareness.
That's awesome. So tell us about your book. You're a published author. Tell us. Is it still in print? Can we still get it if people wanted to read it?
You can, yes, actually. And I have to send the link. But I am, let me tell you, I am the type of person that suffers from imposter syndrome, right? I always want to promote other people, and that's what I do. But when it comes to myself, I'm always like, oh yeah, I forgot I'm a published. I forgot that I'm a published author.
Oops.
So I know that's really sad, but it's something that I'm working on. So this book is all about it's Sisters in Arms, the Black Diamond Experience. It's a compilation of so many stories of African American women who rose from tragedy to triumph. You have survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, depression, anxiety. So my chapter is focused on being good enough and how you feel good enough. And I tell the story of my domestic violence marriage. I tell the story of how I have to get validation from outside people to make myself feel worthy. And that still too is a process, and how I have to continue to challenge my negative thoughts and change them into positive thoughts. And one thing that I've started doing that's in the book is that I challenge those negative thoughts. So when I get to the point where I'm thinking, hey, I'm a bad mom because of something that I did, I'll challenge that and I'll start writing down facts about the ways that I'm a good mom. And then those facts that I write down in paper will actually negate the thought that I had for not being a good mom. So I actually have to ask myself, when I have these thoughts in my head about my self-esteem, self-confidence, being a good mom, are these thoughts in my head actual reality? Are they factual, or are they just thoughts that are in my head? And just thoughts. So that is what my chapter is about, I am good enough and I feel good enough. It is actually on my Instagram page, my personal Instagram page for Roweena Davis. So people can still purchase copies there. I have about 4 left, I think. So people can still purchase copies there, and I will send those out. But I was really excited to be a part of this book. And it's my first book, hopefully not the first of a few many, but it was something that I was, proud to do, and something that I didn't think I could accomplish, which is a lot of times things that I think of myself, but I accomplished it and I did it, and it was an amazing experience.
On to the next thing.
Yes.
Right.
On to the next thing. Yes, on to the
Roweena,
next thing.
where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you? What's the best way to get contact you?
So they can contact me. My Instagram is at Roweena, Roweena, Allavian, Allovian. They can also follow me on Instagram for We Believe You, which is We Believe You SOS, and by email at webelieveyousos@gmail.com.
Well, Roweena, it was so good getting to chat with you about this and your initiative and advocacy for this. people always ask me how I find my guests on my show. And I said, it's usually by accident. I'm like, oh, what's that? Who's that? Wait, they need to be on my podcast. So I'm so glad that you were part of this. And for everyone listening, I hope you got a chance to know a little bit more about Roweena and her initiative and her advocacy for helping people suffering from domestic violence. And as always, please stay safe, take care of each other, and until next time.